Hello, everybody, and welcome to Knowledge 10, Lesson 11, Liberty and Justice for All. Well, I want you to stop and think who we've been learning about. It's mostly American men who were important to the development of America before, during, and after the Revolution. Well, today you're going to learn more about others who were living in America because, there were other people. There were women. There were enslaved Africans, there were Native Americans, and while I'm reading, I want you to think about what they might have been doing while others were fighting and planning their independence from Great Britain. Okay, this is the Declaration of Independence, remember? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where have you heard those words before? Listen again and see if you remember who wrote these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you remember who wrote that? That was Thomas Jefferson, right? And here he is, Thomas Jefferson. He wrote them as part of our Declaration of Independence. Remember how the founders felt that they were being treated unfairly by the British? They did not feel that they were being treated equally or the same as the British on the other side of the ocean. The colonists wanted liberty or freedom from the rules of the British. And so when Jefferson sat down to write these famous words, he wanted to make sure that the new American nation would treat its people fairly. I don't know if Thomas Jefferson had a dog, and I don't have a dog, but you might hear one barking in the background because my neighbor has a dog, and all that dog does is bark. I guess it eats too, but it seems to bark an awful lot. Anyway, when the founders met to write our Constitution of the United States, they wrote about liberty and justice. When we hold our hands over our hearts and pledge allegiance to our country, our final words are, with liberty and justice for all. Now, these are important words written by our founders, but not all people were treated fairly in the American colonies. Can you think of someone back then who wasn't treated fairly? Well, let's look back at the 1700s during and after the war when the founders were busy writing those words. Whom did they mean by we when they wrote in the Constitution, "We, the people of the United States"? Some people say they must have been thinking about themselves, a group of white men who made the laws of the land. Were they forgetting the other people on the continent? Native Americans who had lived there the longest? Women? Enslaved Africans? These were very smart men writing words they knew would be read and reread by others for many years to come. They were writing for the future. But it is true that not everyone in colonial times was treated equally, and even today, people are still seeking liberty and justice for all. During the Revolutionary War, women had different roles from what they have today. Although many women serve in our military and help protect us, this wasn't the case during the Revolutionary War. Some women wanted to be soldiers, but they were not allowed to join the army. Well, do you think that was fair? We know that some women actually disguised themselves by dressing like men so they could fight alongside them. You see in the picture there, one of those people is Deborah Sampson. One of the most famous was Deborah Sampson, who fought in the war under the name of Robert Shirtliff. Women were also not allowed to vote, and in fact, all women did not receive the right to vote for nearly 150 years after the Constitution was written. Was that liberty and justice for all? Now tug on that t-shirt of yours, or whatever clothing you're wearing. It might have cotton in it. This is what cotton looks like when it's growing. There were many people from Africa who were brought to America and enslaved by the colonists. When the colonists decided to fight for their freedom from Great Britain, They themselves were keeping freedom from a large number of Africans by making slaves out of them. These Africans did not have the freedom to choose how to live their lives. Slavery was especially common in the South, where huge plantations had large amounts of land to farm, and the colonists depended on the work of enslaved Africans. In the New England and Middle States, slavery began to disappear after the Revolutionary War, but it continued for a long time in the South, where these large farms were located. Enslaved Africans were also not allowed to vote. Was that liberty and justice for all? For a long time, Native Americans lived on the North American continent alone. Yet, life for them began changing when the first European explorers arrived hundreds of years before the Revolutionary War. You'll remember that some of them chose to help the colonists and trade with them when they first arrived. Think of the Wampanoag chiefs and the first Thanksgiving, right? However, it wasn't long before the colonists started exploring lands to the west, pushing Native Americans off their land. Native Americans were also not allowed to vote. Was that liberty and justice for all? So, what do you think? Was the decision of our nation's founders to fight a 6-year war for independence a wise decision? It probably was. The government they set up 200 years ago has served as a model for the rest of the world ever since. It was certainly not fair to all people in the early years, and there are still many ways in which it can be improved, but it is up to us, we, the people, to make each day a better day for all of us. All right, what were the two big words that you were listening for there? Liberty and justice. What do they mean? Well, liberty is freedom. So if I give you liberty, I give you freedom. And if I treat you with justice, I am treating you fairly, right? Now, the Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal, but what groups of people that you heard about were not given the same rights as men at the time the Declaration was written? Well, women weren't treated fairly. Enslaved Africans did not have liberty. Native Americans were not treated with justice. Right? Now, in the read aloud you heard, the founders did not feel that they were being treated equally or the same as the British on the other side of the ocean. Say that word, equally. Equally means treating someone exactly the same as another, or dividing something into parts that are the same size or amount. Like, I divided the pie equally among all the people at the table. Like, I shared dominoes equally among my classmates. What's that word we're talking about? Equally, right? Try to use that today. All right, that is it. And the next lesson you hear will be the very last lesson in Knowledge 10. We've come a long way, and I want you to remember everything that you've learned. Okay? Bye.